Hello, everybody, and welcome to my talk. I'm very happy to see so many of you here, even though it's 5 p.m. and I know you're ready for the party afterwards. And please bear with me, I'm slightly nervous over here. I'll try to do my best. I work for the Norwegian government. I work in the Norwegian Labor and Welfare Directorate. The story I'm going to share with you today is inspired by a series of events that happened 2 years ago when we entered the pandemic. And I will talk about developers becoming first responders. And that's not the first thing that comes to people's minds when thinking about first responders. So I will tell you how we faced the pandemic and how we got through this. So I am a team lead for a group of developers in NAV. I am also active in the Norwegian developer community. I'm also doing architectural meetups and keeping that thing alive. So yeah, today I will present a short historic overview of NAV. I will give you some context and a little bit background. I will talk to you about our digital transformation, what we did, and I will talk about how we rapidly deliver software. Then I will tell the story about the pandemic and how we shifted to a product mindset, product development, and also touch very briefly into servant leadership, why that's important, and then we will round with some key takeaways on what we learned. So I want to start talking about first responders because first responders are they are the ones who actually save people's lives, literally, and they do this when it actually matters the most. And we usually think about paramedics saving human lives when it counts the most. Every minute counts. We think about firefighters, like on this picture from Paris after an explosion in a bakery, where the firefighters are fighting every second, and every second counts actually to save human lives. We think about the police, which is after a very few minutes only at the place in the scenes, helping protecting humans' lives. And of course, our doctors, nurses, who day and night work and save a lot of life, like here during the pandemic. And then we also have our coastal guards actually also saving lives when there is any accident in the open waters. And they use software that tracks the ships, and they can immediately respond. So I want to start now by saying a huge thanks to all of them, because the work they do is extremely important, and I'm very grateful. So yeah. So the pandemic, when it hit, we as a governmental agency, in just a few days and in a couple of few weeks only in March, several thousands of people was temporarily laid off. They lost their income for some time, and as a governmental agency, we knew that our responsibility in the society, our reason for being, is for actually helping the Norwegian citizens. So we knew that every day that passed counted, because we know that in a matter of days, the people would lose their income. So 13th of March, and funny, it was a Friday the 13th, we was all collectively in Norway ordered home. And this was also the time when we knew that if we didn't do something, people would lose their income. And This is difficult because in Norway at that time, in order to determine if people can get monetary support, we need some manual case processing in order to know how much support people will get. And usually it takes a month when a citizen applies for a benefit until you get actually a response whether you got that support or not. And also for the employers, they have to send printed layoff notices to NAV, which need to be scanned and manually processed by hand. So, but without the ability to do business, they don't have the possibility to pay out salaries. And in Norway, when companies temporarily lay off their employees, they also need to support them for the first 15 days. And with in just a week when 300,000-ish people is laid off and with no other way of getting support, they could, well, lose, they wouldn't have food on the table. And so the first 15 days is usually covered by the employer, and then NAV will cover the next year or so. The government made a change, so the government actually pays the 18 days. You get full salary for a total of 20 days, and then when your application is handled, you also get the message if you got the full benefit, unemployment benefit. So this is to make it easier for the employers. And in Norway, the way things work, on the top of the chain here is the Norwegian law. There is this thing called the National Insurance Act, which is the regulation determining how much support, what kind of support, and so on. This is governed by the government and parliament, who in turn, this is implemented, the laws and regulations are implemented by the Ministry of Labor and Welfare. And I work in the State Labor and Welfare Directorate. This is where the IT side is. We take those laws and regulations and we translate them into IT systems. And then we also have the municipal public offices facing the citizens, who turns this into routines. And knowing that the applications would take like a month, usually we knew that we didn't have so much time. Over that, from Friday and over that first weekend, we collected almost 300 people from NAV. We collectively brainstormed and came up with ideas on how to support our business people, because they are the ones who are actually meeting the public. And we generated a lot of ideas in order how to, what changes we can do, how we can ease their job, and so on. And here is statistics from Slack. This is from 2020, and the numbers are from 2020. You see that spike over here. It's high. This is that first week when everyone was ordered home, and we had to basically turn around and figure out how to help. So the weeks pass. Towards the end, the government finally came up with one regulation that made it possible for us to implement one service that is able to pay out support, financial support for citizens who are temporarily laid off. And the teams in NAV, they immediately started the work. And what we needed was one web application that is making it possible for citizens to actually apply for the unemployment benefit, and backend services written in Kotlin, who performs the calls to our legacy systems written in COBOL, which is 40 years old. I will show you in a minute. And this happened over that weekend, actually, because on Monday then the system was put in production. We used feature toggling to gradually open up the solution for for the people who was applying, for the citizens. And so we was following this production, 25%, the number of applicants and the forms being processed, 50%, and then suddenly 100%, and then boom, down. The solution is down. And what happened actually was that we made a lot of calls to the Norwegian tax authority, and the systems was overloaded. However, because of close cooperation with them, we got this solution up and running. So within an hour, the systems were back up again, taking away and automating the process. And so this is what happened. During that first week, and so we paid out 1 billion Norwegian kroner. And then over the next year, we've almost had 8.5 billion Norwegian kroner through the system, which was written in React, TypeScript, Kotlin, and making the payments through our old and very, very stable COBOL systems. So how was this thing possible? And it's not only the technological part of this. We had a cross-functional team sitting around the same table. And a cross-functional team with several, including business people, actually sitting together trying to understand the laws and the regulations, and architects as well. We had representatives from the government, and we was able to deliver the software very quickly and rapidly. I will tell you in a minute how. When we have embraced open source technologies that makes this possible. And the last one here that I will point out is the sense of ownership, because it took a while before IT became a natural, essential part of the whole organization. Because if the IT systems go down, the actual the services offered by the business goes down. So that means that IT is an essential part of the organization. So the team and the developers and everyone had this sense of ownership that this is ours. We have to do something to help people. So how did we get there? I mean, how did we do this? I'm going to talk a little bit about history to give you the context of how this happened. So before we had NAV, this organization was 3 separate organizations: the National Insurance Administration, the National Labor Agency, and the Municipal Public Social Welfare Offices. And in 2006, the government decided to merge all of them together, and we had NAV. The reason was, we want to have one place that citizens can go to where they can get all the help they need and all the welfare services they need. NAV manages 1/3 of the national budget. That's a lot of money. We have totaling 19,000 employees and counting, providing service to just about 3 million people, and processing like 4 million cases yearly. And from 2016, when we started hiring our own developers, from 2016 till now, we have increased from 1 developer to 350 developers, including designers and data engineers. More than 140 teams, 75 cross-functional teams. We embrace open source. We have open sourced a lot, more than 1,400 repos in GitHub and counting, and 800-ish employees totaling. So we have 2 legacy systems, which is extremely important in Norway, and which actually make the basis of how the society actually keeps working. The first one is Infotrygd. It was developed in the 70s, and it's still actually running. We are going to modernize. We are continuously doing this, and we are going to phase this thing out. But it's still running, and it's extremely stable. So a big kudos to those developers that did this, actually. But it's getting old, and we are going to phase this thing out. The second system is Arena. It was created in the 90s. This is where everything regarding employment is. In Infotryg, we have the insurance information like pension, child support, sick leave. Those are Infotryg. Here we have the labor information. And this is written in Oracle Forms. I will not make a comment about how user-friendly this looks, but we will modernize this as well. So when NAV became a reality in 2006, this was the period when SOA was, had a big impact in the industry. So, and NAV was also embracing SOA and developing software and architectures based on SOA. So when we were doing this for quite a while, until Sam Newman published his book on microservices, and the industry shifted, the architectural landscape shifted over to microservices because people were seeing the problems with SOA and the problems we had with this. I mean, extremely expensive servers and so on. This servers, difficult to make changes and so on. Doing microservices for a while, we then realized, well, when we take those big monoliths and we break them down to smaller services, and we then group them logically according to domains, we soon noticed that, well, it's actually not enough, because doing only microservices, it doesn't give you the actual benefit if you don't have the supporting organization together with it. So from 2016 until now, we have shifted again from doing only microservices to doing microservices, but in a social technical way, which means embracing the social interactions around the company, since we know that the social interactions and the communication within the organization is going to have a direct effect on the architecture that you will be sitting with. I will be back to this in a minute. So let me just go through quickly SOA, because NAV had a deal with IBM. We were using the Websphere platforms. And as I said, extremely expensive, difficult to change. The services running in the ESP without actually breaking something else. This was a huge risk, and every time we had those major, gigantic deliveries, something could go wrong, and then fixing it would be difficult. So here's a handmade model. I'm sorry if there's a mistake here, but the ESP in the middle here, we have the data providers on one side, and then the consumers on that other side. In the middle here, between them, you have the integration teams. And this was a big deal, actually, because there was a while when we was hiring integration architects, integration developers. So this was a big deal. The integration developers and architects they are actually modeling the web services running on the ESP and dealing with the integrations into the bus. So, and changing something in here would, it could break something else unintended. So here's a view. You see how the process of developing those services is pretty sequential. It starts by creating a strategy and gathering requirements and goals, but however, gathering all the requirements, because we was trying to fix everything, was trying to solve and understand everything beforehand. Those later on was modeled and by integration modelers on the platform. And then when you had the artifacts that was created, those artifacts was then executed on the enterprise service bus, which then made them available to consumers. But how was this affecting our teams? This is a picture I made to illustrate how, this is around 2014 when I was working on the disability benefit modernization program. So what you see here, I'm gonna take you through here. It's very sequential. When we had those iterative development periods between the architects, developers, testers, It's very handover based, handover from the architects has done some work, we hand them over to the developers do something, hand them over to the testers. It could actually take up to 5 months or 6 months actually, once it even happened, until this, what we created, reached the business people who's going to use the software. And at one point when I got one bug report, I was like, which one was that? And so there was a few deliveries throughout the year, which was of course very huge deliveries containing many features. So when something went wrong, well, good luck trying to figure out the problem. It could be very complicated. And then we had some partial deliveries throughout, but looking at this, I mean, the few deliveries that was, the project, the modernization project there soon failed. The budgets was exceeded massively. And well, why did it actually go wrong? I mean, it's not only because of SOA. It's actually many other more important things, because when Nav started its journey in 2006, this was an organization that had to learn to work together. It was an organization that tried to figure out everything without actually delivering code. So, and it was an organization where IT was looked at as a resource. It was not an essential part of the business. And finally there, it was an organization that didn't have the ownership on their own systems. You have people coming in and then leaving with all the knowledge they have. And back we have now without the actual ownership. And then at the same time, the technology evolving, the world evolving and fast moving, and makes it very hard to adapt to that world. So we knew that something had to be done, because this is taxpayers' money and we have a responsibility. So in 2016, we made several changes to address this. So we started the digital transformation, and we started this process of reinventing Nav. And we realized that we have big programs to finance big projects that solve big problems that result in big systems. And big systems, well, they are the monoliths, which is difficult to work on, difficult to fix, difficult to maintain, and so on. And here's an example. This is public, so that's why I included it. This is you see in the middle there is the ESP. And this is a screenshot of how the network traffic was through the system in 2014, with the external connections on the blue side here and the internal systems around. Looking at this brings us over to Conway's law. And Conway's law says that the organization's design is highly reflected based on how the communication structure is within the organization. So the more complicated communication lines, and the more complex will your organization be. So, and the complex communication structures results in complicated architecture as well. So what we did was, in that period when we was shifting away from SOA, we was starting to do more microservice architecture, breaking the monoliths down, modeling them based on domains, putting boundaries between them. This resulted in a different organizational model, which is much simpler, which is making it much easier for people to actually communicate with each other. So, but how did we do this? We was highly influenced by the science, which was published on this, especially this book, Accelerate, which is proving that DevOps works, and we could use this as argument also to the management. Very important book. And then we was reading about reinventing organizations, which is discussing the history and future of organizations. And this book is even discussing the next level of humanity, actually. Very interesting. And then Team Topologies by Matthew Skelton, talking how to organize our business and teams for fast flow. And there is also another important thing with this book. It also discusses the interaction points between the different teams and how we can make that part better. Marty Kagan wrote Inspired to discussing how do we do product management and how do we build great teams. He also wrote the Empowered, which is discussing how can we create much more healthy environments? How can we actually lead people in a much better way so they actually thrive and where you can have psychological safety. So these are the books which I highly recommend because these books have shaped how NAV is today. And these books are also the basis scientifically for how we also was dealing with the political things around this. We also changed all the tool sets we have to more cloud and real-time oriented tools. We shifted away from those on the left to more cloud-oriented tools. And what had a major impact in NAV was especially Slack and GitHub, making it easier for people to directly connect, directly talk, and without going through those big chains of several weeks and in some cases months before you got an answer. We also did another thing. We made it possible for teams to select the language of their choice, the hardware of their choice, because we was locked down in a virtual development environment. I don't want to even start explaining how painful that was. And when thinking about the pandemic, thinking about that everyone was ordered home, and thinking about those a couple of hundred people, 1,000 people needing help, it was crucial actually for us to be able to program and code from our individual hardware at home. So this had a major impact, and no one dares to even think what would have happened if this was not a reality. We also did, I talked about open source. We open sourced, but we started by, we had GitHub, but we had everything closed at the moment, and we slowly opened up. We also work on cloud and data platform. Okay, so now I'm going to speak about this, how to enable teams for fast flow. First of all, we need these three things here: fast, safe, and automated delivery pipeline, unified application development, and decoupled architecture, and socio-technical systems thinking. I practiced this a lot to be able to say this word. So, and what this means is, because thinking about Conway's law, when we started using microservices, even though microservices solves some issues that we were struggling with SOA, it was important for us to not recreate the mess that we had before. So we had to understand that architecture is a product of the organization that creates it and the social interactions within that organization. So it's this total system that needs to be, we have to work on that. We also need high collaboration. We have been talking a lot about pair programming, mob programming, clear direction, so everyone is on board the same path, doing many small continuous incremental deploys, which enables the teams to adjust the course of direction throughout the development period, and also then alignment and empowerment. So we have something called NICE in NAV. This is our application platform. It's a Kubernetes-based platform. It's open source, and we have this because making the DevOps a DevOps pipeline means that as a developer you have many tools, and every tool has their own set of possibilities on how you can configure them. So having NICE makes us able to do one-click deploys, and it reduces the number of considerations and choices that developers need to make. And I took this quote from the documentation on nice.io. Leverage open source projects best suited for our needs and provide them with usable abstractions, sane defaults, and required security hardening. So the delivery pipeline is taken care of the platform team. This is how it looks. The developer can configure its deployment pipeline in a YAML file. Just by using that, configuring everything in the YAML file, everything can be automated into the production environments. We use GitHub Actions a lot, and NICE will take care of getting your artifacts and your applications to production. In our case, for a long period, we had on-prem data centers. We are shifting now to Google Cloud. So going from very few deployments, implementing this automated delivery pipeline made us able to deploy hundreds of times each day. This is a big shift from how it was before. We also had a design system, and the design system makes it possible for developers to develop front-end applications much faster, because there is no need to reinvent the wheel every time. Plus, we are a public sector organization, which means that we have very strict rules that we have to follow concerning accessibility. And this is also open source, by the way. And the design system also takes care of the accessibility here. So making it much easier and also a more unified way to create front-end applications. So we have the DevOps pipeline, we have this design system and so on, great. But it's actually still possible to go in the right direction, because moving fast, but moving fast in the wrong direction can still lead to issues, because you might not actually create value for the users. So to go in the right direction, we need metrics, loggers, monitoring, statistics, and analytics. And in our case, we use a tool called Amplitude. Amplitude has it has a free option that you can try if you want, if you're curious. It's way beyond Google Analytics. Google Analytics is for web pages, for content, while Amplitude is created solely with the purpose of product development. So highly recommended. We also use Unleash, which is a feature toggling framework to gradually roll out our software in a safe manner. So product teams. Why is this important? Having a product mindset. Having the product mindset means understanding that it's important that your users are included, that you have short feedback loops. And for the product itself, a good craftsmanship is important, but you also need the organization around, the supporting organization that is actually supporting the development of the product itself, especially since we know the consequences of Conway's law. We also have product mindset. We need to think about technology, the data, and we have to especially work on culture, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So in product development, it's extremely important to understand that we have to change our mindset on as one thing especially. And this is when we are creating products, we are not establishing here we started, here we finish, but we understand that a product lives continuously over a long time. And what is important is not finishing on time, but we shift our mindset to ability to change over time, not on a precise, on certain time, but over time. Since the world is moving, the world is changing, and there is a lot of things that we cannot control. So the ability to change and understand it evolves over time. And Jonas, the CTO in Nav IT, he described the importance of this in a very nice way, because our social technical ambitions for the organization, we shifted our focus from the solutions itself, and we shifted our focus to the organization, because it's important to see in product development that the ability to change is not only about the solution's ability to change, but also the organization that develops the solutions and the ability to change in the overall system. So this is how we described it. And I wanted to include Henrik Nyberg, Spotify, as well, because you can have the best the DevOps pipeline and product teams. That's great, and but even having all of those things, it can still go wrong. Having autonomy, but not alignment. Alignment means going the same technical direction, understanding the which goals to prioritize, and so on. So good product management and better technical alignment, and yeah. So then culture. Culture is a very big term, but one thing on this is that we need to understand users' needs differently. We have to understand that we have to start with the users. We have to understand the problems we are going to solve, and then work backwards, because history has shown us when we start from the technology side and we work to create something that we believe might solve the problems, we go in the wrong direction. So we need to understand the problems. We need to understand our users. So together with the designers in Nav, we have been working a lot with understanding this and trying to challenge existing mindset. I have a silly example here, two teams, two islands, and they are being told to, hey, solve the problem of communicating with that other side. And if you as a leader, for example, you gave them very hard directions, telling people what to do, you could have ended with a bridge that might have solved some issues, but not allowing people to experiment, not allowing people to freely communicate and understand the actual needs, you could have ended up actually inventing the wireless communication platforms, because it's about allowing people to feel safe, having the psychological safety to try and to learn and to understand. So this brings me over to psychological safety, and to model culture, I included Westrum's model of culture, where he says we have to shift from pathological organizations, which is power-oriented, and over to generative green organizations, which is embracing the adapting culture and society and around the continuous delivery, agile leadership. And here is a table explaining how pathological organizations are power-oriented and gradually going to the left, to the generative. And when I was reading this book, I also actually saw how the author of Reinventing Organizations, when he is explaining the power-oriented organizations, how that actually fits quite well with the Western model here. So another reason to actually look at that book. Okay, so we talked about the history of now the SOA and DevOps with product teams and so on. And then we need also different kind of leadership. So, and this is a very big topic. And I will share with you what I believe personally is important, and how do we actually treat people, because we want to create an environment where people feel safe to tell their opinions, share their minds, experiment and try and fail. So I was talking about this topic with one of my colleagues, Fredrik, and then he explained to me that leadership is building support frameworks around your people and then gradually building them down, building those support mechanisms away. So when your people actually grows, they will be more free and they will stand on their own feet. And by leaving them on their own, they will have much more higher psychological safety to actually do things. And Satya Nadella from Microsoft, he was asked, what do you think is the biggest source of innovation? And he said empathy, but he added that it's important for us to have the ability to put ourselves in people's shoes and see the world from the way they see it. And that's empathy. So, okay, so empathy, trust. We need trust between the leadership and the people. And how do we do this? I have some mantras here that I want to share to you. Because how do we treat people? Well, your life is not your office, your calendar, or your timesheet. Family and friends are very important. I, as a leader, understand that. Whenever you feel down, take a day off. That's totally fine. Whenever you feel you need support, don't worry, I got your back. When you say you made a mistake, I say, well, you made a discovery, and you have this chance to adjust your course. And this one, in the last, I personally think that everyone should ask this question to their colleagues, especially leaders asking this for their employees, but how can I make your day and your experience better? This is how when I try to build a relation with my people, it's extremely important for me to ask how they are, how they feel. Okay, so wrapping up here, some key takeaways. So our initial transformation of the organization was extremely important, because when the pandemic hit and so many people was ordered home without the ability to work, without employees and businesses able to operate, our digital transformation and the changes we made in the organization helped us basically get through the pandemic in a very smooth way. We could work home from our PCs, we could deliver software quickly, and the years before this, we also worked on the vision and the roadmap, having a clear idea of where are we heading, so everyone can head the same direction. And what is that? Well, we want to create the best welfare system in the world. That's what we want to do. And IT is an essential part of that organization. Trust, diversity, and inclusion. This is something that is very important. We have been discussing this for some years, and we are still working on this. And autonomous, interdisciplinary teams, well, the product teams, the cross-functional teams, making sure that the teams are empowered in terms of having all the skills they need in order to develop products quickly. And possibilities and challenges of digital tools, which is also important. And we are still learning how to make the organization better, and more on the product development mindset. One nice thing with COVID was, though, that we quickly learned the pains, the weaknesses, and the deficiencies on how can we make life better for everyone. And the final here, how we can recreate culture around social arenas, the breaks and the gatherings. So all of these are extremely important. And I want to recommend a couple of talks tomorrow, which is related to some of the things I shared today. Rafael is going to talk to you about the Norwegian Tax Authority. And Trond, he will talk about a topic that is especially interesting if you're interested in architecture, socio-technical systems thinking, and how building fences can make it. I highly recommend these talks. Is relevant for what I talked to today. So that was my presentation. If you have any questions, I have 5 minutes to answer.
It's not completely connected to the conclusions that you wrote, but I just pay attention that you said that you have removed using of Jira. What was how do you manage your tasks today?
True. Yeah, I mean, we didn't completely remove Jira, so that's right. I mean, but we made a very important decision, and that decision was that when we are transitioning away from waterfall methodology and over to more product development, and I mean, we understood that we had to change the way we work, and we allowed the teams to select their own tools on how they want to follow up their works. And we allowed the teams to use Trello. And Trello allowed our development teams to organize themselves, self-organizing teams. We still use Jira though for service, I'm not exactly sure about the precise term over there, for support mechanisms in the organization. So we have Jira to some level, but it's way, way less than what it used to be before we digitalized the organization. So it basically means, I mean, I will point that out. Thank you. I will point that out next time. I mean, especially for the development teams, the transition has been important, especially since I was explaining the very long time it took for people to reply to each other. Any other question? Okay. If there's any other comments, questions, please feel free to come here and ask me that. I will be standing here. And thank you a lot for listening to me, and thanks to everyone on the stream. So have a nice day for going forward, and have a nice party. Thank you.